The summer sun was scorching the streets of Ardencroft, turning the asphalt into a red-hot frying pan. The heat was now in its third week, forcing the locals to seek coolness in the shade of trees and sparse air-conditioned rooms. At the bus stop, blown by the hot wind, Kimbra Rayford stood, wiping sweat from her forehead with a colorful handkerchief. Her dark skin glistened in the sun, and her eyes stared into the distance, waiting for the bus from the correctional facility. Today was a special day. Her husband Randall was coming home after 2 years in prison. Kimbra nervously fidgeted with the edge of the summer dress she'd bought for the occasion. 24 months of waiting, 24 months of loneliness in their small apartment on the outskirts of town, and today was going to be the day everything was going to change. When the dusty bus finally showed up in the distance, Kimbra's heart raced faster. She fixed her hair, trying to look perfect, though the humid air was mercilessly ruining the style. The bus came to a screeching halt, and people began to get off, mostly men with small bags, silent and wary, like wild animals returning to an unfamiliar environment. Randall was one of the last to come out. He was thinner than she remembered him, and there were new wrinkles in the corners of his eyes. But it was him, the husband she'd been waiting for all this time. Kimbra rushed to him, hugging him as tightly as if she was afraid he'd disappear. "You're home," she whispered, feeling his arms tentatively hugging her back. "You're finally home." Randall smiled weakly, his gaze wandering around the neighborhood as if he were reacquainting himself with the open space. "Yes, I am," he said hoarsely, as if he was tired of talking. The drive to their apartment was strangely silent. Kimbra tried to fill the silence with stories about the neighbors, about her work at the cafe, about small changes in the neighborhood, but Randall just nodded, absorbed in his own thoughts. She knew he needed time to adjust. 2 bus transfers in this hellish heat wasn't conducive to conversation, but it seemed to Kimbra that it wasn't just that. Their apartment on the 3rd floor of an old brick building greeted them with stuffiness. Kimbra immediately opened all the windows, turned on the only fan they could afford. "I made your favorite ribs with barbecue sauce," she said, trying to lighten the mood. "And I bought beer. Remember how you always liked Blue Moon?" Randall walked slowly through the apartment, touching things as if trying to make sure they were real. He stopped in front of their wedding picture, the only one they could afford, taken by a cheap photographer in a city park. "It's different here," he said finally. "I rearranged the furniture a little," Kimbra hastened to explain. "And I bought a new couch when the old one fell apart. But everything else is the same." But they both knew it wasn't the furniture. It was themselves that had changed. Randall, who'd spent 2 years behind bars, and Kimbra forced to survive on her own. The evening passed in awkward attempts to get back on track. They ate ribs that Kimbra had cooked all day, drank beer, talked about nothing. But behind every word, behind every gesture, there was a gulf 24 months of separation that couldn't be bridged in one evening. At night, lying in bed, they were like strangers. Randall lay on his back, staring at the ceiling, and Kimbra was afraid to touch him, not knowing how he'd react. "I missed you every day," she whispered into the darkness. Randall turned toward her, and in the dim light of the street lamp filtering through the thin curtains, she saw the pain in his eyes. "Me too," he replied, and for the first time all day, he truly embraced her. The next few days were filled with Randall's attempts to adjust to freedom. He flinched at loud noises, woke up in the middle of the night with nightmares, and was nervous in crowds of people. Kimbra tried to be patient, realizing he needed time. But there was something else. Kimbra would sometimes catch her husband's strange look, as if he were trying to solve some mystery. And when her phone rang, she always stepped away to talk, explaining that she didn't want to disturb him. Randall didn't ask, but suspicion slowly crept into his heart. On the 5th day after Randall's return, Kwame Price, his best friend since high school, visited them. Kwame was the only one who regularly visited Randall in prison, apart from Kimbra herself. "Bro!" Kwame exclaimed, hugging his friend. "God damn, it's good to see you free." Tall and stout, with a wide smile, Kwame brought with him an air of celebration. He brought a 6-pack of beer, some snacks, and an endless stream of stories about what had happened in the neighborhood over the past 2 years. "You wouldn't believe it. Old Jackson finally sold his store, And now it's some fancy coffee shop for the whites who've started settling the east side of the neighborhood," Kwame said as he opened his third bottle of beer. "They say it won't be long before the whole Ardencroft is filled with these expensive condos." Randall listened, trying to take in the changes that had taken place during his absence. Kimbra was bustling around serving appetizers, but Randall noticed that she was avoiding Kwame's direct gaze, and Kwame was deliberately not looking in her direction. "How's work going, Kim?" Kwame asked when the conversation about the neighborhood news had died down. "Same old," Kimbra shrugged. "Same rude customers, same small tips." "Kimbra's working double shifts now," Randall noted. "Comes home past midnight." "We needed the money," Kimbra replied quickly. "The rent went up $50 last year." Randall nodded, but something in Kimbra's tone made him wary. Or did it just seem that way to him? 2 years in prison had taught him to be suspicious of everyone and everything. When Kwame left, promising to help him find a job, Kimbra began cleaning up the bottles and leftovers. "Did Kwame come by a lot while I was gone?" Randall asked casually. Kimbra froze for a moment, but then continued cleaning. "Sometimes. He'd bring groceries when I didn't have any money at all. Helped me fix the faucet in the bathroom when it broke. He's a good friend." Randall didn't say anything, but a strange sense of unease lingered in his mind. The next day, Reisha, Kimbra's older sister, visited them. Unlike Kwame's welcome, the meeting with Rizia was filled with tension from the first moment. "So you're back," Rizia said in lieu of greeting, giving Randall a cold stare. "I hope you won't get my sister into trouble this time." "Rizi, please." Kimbra tried to intervene, but her sister paid her no attention. "Do you have any idea what she went through while you were sitting there?" Rizia continued. "Working herself to exhaustion, counting every penny, denying herself everything." "I didn't ask her to wait for me," Randall said quietly. "It was her choice." "Choice?" Rizia snorted. "She's just too kind and naive, always has been." The conversation never got better. Rizia only stayed for dinner because of Kimbra's insistence, but the atmosphere at the table was icy. When Rizia finally left, Randall breathed a sigh of relief. "She's always hated me," he said, as he helped Kimbra clear the table. "Even before I went to prison. She's just worried about me." Kimbra sighed. "You know she feels responsible after her parents died." "She doesn't think I'm worthy of you." "No, she doesn't. She just—" Kimbra stopped, not knowing how to finish her sentence. "Just what?" "She just wants me to be okay," Kimbra said finally, but there was uncertainty in her voice. The job search was more difficult than Randall had expected. Every time a potential employer found out about his criminal record, they were instantly disinterested. After a week of unsuccessful attempts, Randall began to lose hope. "Maybe we should try another neighborhood," Kimbra suggested, seeing his frustration. "Where no one knows you." "And how do you envision that?" Randall snapped at her. "I'd still have to put on the form that I was in jail. That's going to be a problem everywhere." Kimbra remained silent, realizing his frustration. Randall immediately regretted his abruptness. "I'm sorry," he said, taking her hand. I feel useless. You're working your ass off, and I can't even get the simplest job." "It'll get better," Kimbra tried to cheer him up. "Kwame said there might be room at his cousin's auto shop. They're not too picky about backgrounds." Kwame, Randall muttered. "All I hear from you is Kwame this, Kwame that." Kimbra pulled her hand away, her eyes narrowing. "He helped me when no one else would, and he's trying to help you now. What's happening to you?" "Me?" Randall raised his voice. "What's going on with you? You think I don't see you tense up every time your phone rings? How you go out on the balcony to talk? How you act weird when Kwame is around?" Kimbra turned pale. Her hands began to shake. "Are you accusing me of something?" she asked quietly, but there was steel in her voice. "I just want to know the truth. What happened while I was gone?" "Nothing!" Kimbra exclaimed, jumping up from her chair. "I worked my ass off to pay for this apartment, so you'd have a place to come back to. I waited 2 years for you, Randall. 2 years!" "Then why do you act like you have secrets?" Randall wouldn't back down. "Why is it that every time I ask about your work, about your friends, you change the subject?" "Because I'm tired!" Kimbra screamed, tears streaming down her cheeks. I'm tired of it all, of having to prove my loyalty to you all the time, of your suspicions, the fact that you're back and yet it's like you're still not here." They stared at each other across the kitchen table, both breathing heavily, both unable to bridge the chasm of mistrust that had formed between them. "I'm going to get some air," Randall finally said, heading for the door. "Randall, please." Kimbra took a step toward him, but he was already closing the door behind him. Randall wandered the streets of Ardencroft until late at night, trying to sort out his feelings. The heat was still on even as the sun set, the asphalt still holding the heat of the day when he finally got home. Kimbra was asleep, or pretending to be asleep. He lay down beside her, but it was as if a wall had grown between them. In the morning, Kimbra woke him with an unexpectedly tender kiss. "I'm sorry about last night," she said. "I've just been so tired lately." Randall wrapped his arms around her, feeling the tension of the previous evening release. "I'm the one who should be apologizing," he said. "I had no right to blame you." "Quam called you today," Kimbra said, getting out of bed. "He's arranged an interview at that machine shop, 10 o'clock. Randall looked at his watch. It was almost 9 o'clock. "Damn it, why didn't you wake me up earlier?" "You slept so soundly," Kimbra shrugged. "Besides, you still have time. I made breakfast." They had a quick breakfast, and Randall changed into his best shirt and went to the interview. The auto shop was a 20-minute walk away, and he decided to walk to save money on the bus. The interview went unexpectedly well. The owner of the shop, Kwame's cousin, was an understanding man who had once been in trouble with the law himself. He offered Randall a trial period with minimal pay, but with the prospect of growth if he proved himself. Overjoyed, Randall hurried home to share the good news with Kimbra. He even bought her favorite donuts on the way, spending the last of his money. The door to their apartment was ajar, which immediately alerted Randall. Kimbra never left the door open. The neighborhood wasn't a safe one. "Kimbra?" he called out as he entered the hallway. "Are you home?" The silence in response made his heart race. He walked through the living room, then into the kitchen. No one. The door to the bedroom was closed, and he opened it slowly. What he saw made him freeze in place. Kimbra was lying on the floor beside the bed, in a pool of her own blood. Her eyes were open but lifeless, and her neck showed signs of strangulation. Randall screamed, rushing to his wife, trying to find a pulse, though he already realized it was useless. Her body was still warm, but the life had already left him. Without remembering himself, he ran out into the hallway, screaming for help. A neighbor, an elderly Mrs. Johnson, looked out of her apartment and, seeing his bloody hands, immediately called the police. The next hours passed like a blur. Police officers, paramedics, flashing patrol cars, questions he mechanically answered. Their apartment turned into a crime scene, and Randall became the prime suspect, even though he had an alibi, a job interview at a machine shop. That's when Detective Jasmine Powell from Homicide showed up, a tall, slender woman with attentive eyes and a notebook in her hands. She looked at Randall for a long moment before she started asking questions. "Mr. Rayford?" she said in a calm, professional tone. "I need you to tell me everything that happened today, from the moment you woke up to the moment you discovered your wife's body." And Randall began to tell, feeling every word struggle as the reality of what was happening slowly dawned on him. His Kimbra, his wife who had waited for him for 2 years, was dead, and someone had to answer for it. The interrogation room at Ardencroft Police Station was unbearably stuffy, despite the air conditioning running. Jasmine Powell watched Randall Rayford thoughtfully, sitting across from her at the metal desk. His eyes were red from crying, and his hands, still with traces of his wife's blood, trembled slightly. The detective took a sip of her cooled coffee and opened the folder containing the preliminary report. "Now, Mr. Rayford, let's get this straight again," she said, keeping her gaze on the suspect. "You say you left your apartment at approximately 9:30 in the morning to go to a job interview at Johnson & Sons Auto Body Shop, correct?" Randall nodded slowly, his eyes staring off into space. Yeah. Kimbra woke me up and told me that Kwame had arranged the interview. I left around 10:30. "And your wife was alive and well when you left?" "Of course." Randall sounded annoyed. "She made me breakfast. We even made up after last night's fight." Jasmine made a note in her notebook. The neighbors had indeed confirmed that they had heard a loud argument between the couple the day before. "Tell me about the argument," the detective asked, watching Randall's reaction carefully. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "It was stupid. I only got back from prison a week ago. We've both been adjusting. I couldn't get a job because of my past, and Kimbra was working 2 jobs to pay the bills. I felt useless." "It was just a domestic dispute?" Powell insisted. "Or was there something else going on?" Randall fell silent, clearly hesitating. The detective waited patiently, knowing that sometimes silence was the best way to get an answer. I accused her of hiding something from me," he finally admitted. "She's been acting strange since I got back, often answering the phone in the other room, avoiding certain topics. And then there was Kwame." "Kwame Price? A friend of yours?" "Yes," Randall interlocked his fingers nervously. "I thought there was something going on between them while I was in prison. Nothing specific, just a feeling." Jasmine took another note. Jealousy is a classic motive for murder, but there was something about Randall's behavior that made her doubt it. His grief seemed genuine. "Back to this morning," she continued. "You went to the interview. What time did you get home?" "About 11:30. The interview went well. They even put me on probation. I was so glad I bought Kimbra her favorite glazed donuts." His voice trembled. "And then I came back and found her. He couldn't finish the sentence, covering his face with his hands. Jasmine gave him a moment to gather his thoughts. "Mr. Rayford," she said finally, "you must understand what this looks like. You were recently released from prison. You had an argument with your wife the night before she was killed. You accused her of adultery." "I didn't kill Kimbra!" Randall slammed his palm on the table. "I loved her! She waited for me for 2 years while I was in prison. Why would I kill her?" "Maybe you learned something that confirmed your suspicions?" Powell suggested. "Maybe Kimbra confessed something to you this morning that you couldn't forgive." No. Randall's voice sounded desperate. "I was at a job interview. Ask the owner of the machine shop. Ask Kwame. He arranged the whole thing." Jasmine nodded, closing the folder. "We'll be sure to check your alibi, Mr. Rayford. In the meantime, you'll have to stay here." Exiting the interrogation room, Detective Powell ran into her partner, Detective Carter. "Well, what do you think?" he asked, handing her a fresh cup of coffee. "I'm not sure," Jasmine replied thoughtfully. "His grief seems real, but he has a motive, jealousy, and he just got out of prison, where he served time for armed robbery, a history of violent tendencies." The preliminary medical examiner's report puts the time of death between 9:30 and 11 a.m., Carter said. "That coincides with the time Rayford was supposed to be at the interview." "Check his alibi," Jasmine ordered. "And find this Kwame Price. I want to talk to him." Randall spent the night in a holding cell, and the next morning he was brought back to Detective Powell. "Your alibi checks out, Mr. Rayford," Jasmine informed him as soon as he sat down across from her. "The owner of the machine shop confirmed that you were at his interview from 10 to 11 o'clock. Given the time it took to get there and back, you couldn't have physically killed your wife." Randall exhaled in relief, but immediately tensed when he saw the look on the detective's face. "But that doesn't mean you're above suspicion," she continued. "You could have hired someone, or killed her before you left for your interview." "I didn't kill Kimbra," Randall exclaimed. "And I didn't hire anyone. Why would I do that?" "That's what we're trying to find out," Jasmine replied calmly. "So far, we have no reason to detain you further, but I will ask you not to leave the city and to be available for further questions." After Randall was released, Jasmine went to the morgue where the medical examiner's report was waiting for her. Dr. Malik, an older man with a neat gray beard, met her at the entrance. "Detective Powell," he nodded. "I have some interesting data for you." They went into the slaughter room, where the body of Kimbra Rayford lay on a table, covered with a sheet. "The cause of death was strangulation," Dr. Malik began, pointing to the victim's neck. "Judging by the nature of the injuries, the killer used some sort of scarf or belt. But what's interesting is that the victim was hit hard on the head with a blunt object before she died. Maybe her attacker stunned her and then strangled her. Murder weapon? Not found at the crime scene, but the nature of the wound suggests a heavy object with a smooth surface, possibly a vase or a statue. Time of death? Between 9:30 and 11 a.m., as I stated in my preliminary report. Closer to 10, I'd say. So, right after her husband left, Jasmine said thoughtfully. One more detail, Dr. Malik added. The victim showed signs of sexual intercourse shortly before death, within an hour or two. This information made Jasmine think. The couple had reconciled after an argument, and morning sex would be a logical conclusion to the reconciliation. Or had Kimbra met someone right after her husband left? The next stop on the investigation was the Rayford apartment. The technicians had finished collecting evidence, and now Jasmine could survey the crime scene looking for details that might have escaped the attention of others. The apartment was small but clean and well kept. There was shabby furniture in the living room, and a few simple framed photos hung on the walls, mostly of Kimbra and Randall in happier times. On the coffee table were bills and letters, the ordinary life of an ordinary family. In the bedroom where the body had been found, there were still traces of blood on the carpet near the bed. Jasmine looked around the room carefully, paying attention to the smallest details. On the bedside table at Kimbra's side was a shabby paperback novel and a phone charger. The phone had been seized as evidence. In the closet hung neatly hung clothes, Kimbra's modest dresses and blouses on one side, a few of Randall's shirts and pants on the other. Nothing out of the ordinary. Jasmine crossed to the bathroom. In the cabinet above the sink, she found the standard array of medications and cosmetics. But what caught her attention was a packet of birth control pills hidden behind the shampoo bottles. The detective wondered. If Kimbra was taking birth control pills, that meant she wasn't planning a pregnancy. It made sense. Newly reunited family, financial hardship. But why were the pills hidden? Was Kimbra afraid her husband would find them and think she'd cheated on him while he was in prison? Back at the station, Jasmine looked at Kimbra's phone data. There weren't many names on the contact list, mostly relatives, co-workers, and a few girlfriends. But in the call log, one number was more common than others, a number written simply as K. A check revealed that the number belonged to Quam Price. The calls were frequent, especially while Randall was in jail. Some lasted for hours at a time, and many were late at night. Jasmine decided it was time to talk to Kwame. The address was easily obtained from the police database. It turned out Price had a few minor offenses in his past, mostly involving fights and disorderly conduct. Kwame lived in a small apartment in the same neighborhood as the Rayfords. When Detective Powell knocked on his door, he didn't answer for a long time, and when he finally appeared on the doorstep, he looked sleepy and irritable. "Kwame Price?" Jasmine asked, showing her ID. "Detective Powell, homicide. I have a few questions about the Kimbra Rayford case." Kwame's face changed at the mention of Kimbra's name, a mixture of pain and anxiety. "I have already spoken to the police," he muttered. "I don't know anything about the murder." "Still, I'd like to ask you some questions," Jasmine insisted. "May I come in?" Kwame reluctantly stepped aside, allowing the detective into the apartment. It was untidy inside, clothes strewn about, empty beer bottles, dirty dishes in the sink. Typical bachelor pad. "How long had you known Kimbra and Randall Rayford?" Jasmine began, declining the offered chair. "Since we were kids," Kwame answered, taking a seat on the edge of the couch. "Randall and I grew up together. I've known Kimbra since they started dating, about 10 years ago." "Did you keep in contact with Kimbra while Randall was in prison?" Kwame rubbed his neck nervously. "Yes, of course. I helped her as much as I could. She was in a difficult position when Randall went down." "According to the phone records, you two talked a lot," Jasmine said. "Some of the calls lasted for hours and happened late at night." "So?" There was hostility in Kwame's voice. "We were friends. She was lonely." "Just friends?" the detective clarified, watching Kwame's reaction carefully. He visibly tensed, his hands clenched into fists. "What are you trying to say, detective?" "I'm trying to understand the nature of your relationship with Kimbra, Mr. Price. It's relevant to the investigation." "We didn't have any relationship," Kwame snapped. "I was helping my best friend's wife while he was in prison. That's all." "Where were you yesterday between 9:30 and 11 o'clock in the morning?" Kwame fell silent, as if pondering the answer. "I was at home, asleep. I had a night shift at the warehouse. I got back around 6 in the morning." "Can anyone confirm that?" "No, I live alone." "Did you call Randall the night before the murder to arrange an interview for him?" "Yes." Kwame nodded. I called him that evening and told him my cousin could hire him. I called back in the morning to make sure he didn't oversleep. Who did you talk to this morning? With Randall or with Kimbra? Kwame hesitated to answer again. Kimbra. Randall was still asleep. What time was that? I don't remember exactly. Around 9, maybe. Jasmine made a note in her notebook. If Kwame talked to Kimbra around 9 in the morning, it was less than an hour before she died. Anything unusual about her voice or behavior? No, Kwame answered quickly, too quickly in Jasmine's opinion. Everything was business as usual. Mr. Price, Jasmine paused. Randall suspected that there was more than friendship between you and Kimbra. Is that true? Kwame jumped up from the couch, his face contorted with anger. I don't have to answer those questions. Are you accusing me of something? Not yet, Jasmine replied calmly. But if you're withholding information related to the murder, that could change. I'm not hiding anything, Kwame repeated stubbornly. Kimbra was my friend's wife. I helped her because that's what friends do. Jasmine decided to change tactics. When was the last time you saw Kimbra? A couple days before, before what happened, Kwame answered, sitting down again. I went over to their place, brought them a beer, wanted to congratulate Randall on coming home. How'd it go? It was fine, Kwame shrugged. Randall was glad to see me. We had a few drinks, talked. And Kimbra? Kimbra what? How did she behave during your visit? Kwame looked away. Normal, like a lady of the house. Served hors d'oeuvres, occasionally inserted a word into the conversation. Jasmine wasn't sure, but it seemed to her that Kwame was not telling her the truth. However, without concrete proof, she couldn't push harder. Thank you for your time, Mr. Price, she said as she headed for the exit. If you think of anything important, call me. She turned around at the door. By the way, were you at Randall and Kimbra's funeral? What? Kwame was confused. What funeral? When they were in the accident 5 years ago, Jasmine said nonchalantly. You went to your friends' funerals, didn't you? They didn't, Kwame started, but stopped when he saw the detective's eyes on him. Ah, you're testing me. Clever. Goodbye, Mr. Price, Jasmine said as she left the apartment. She was sure Kwame was hiding something. His nervousness, his contradictory answers, everything pointed to it. But was he a murderer? For that, more concrete evidence was needed. The next item on Jasmine's list was Rizia Johnston, Kimbra's sister. Unlike the Rayfords' modest dwelling and Kwame's bachelor pad, Rizia's house in the suburb of Ardencroft looked solid and well-maintained. A small but tastefully decorated yard, a new car in the driveway, everything spoke of a stable financial situation. Rizia met the detective in a strict business suit. She had just returned from her job at a local law firm where she worked as a paralegal. Detective Powell? She nodded dryly as she escorted Jasmine into the living room. I've been looking forward to your visit. I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Johnston, Jasmine began. I know this is a difficult time for you, but I need to ask you some questions. I'm willing to help with the investigation, Rizia replied, sitting down in the chair across from the detective, especially if it helps put my sister's killer behind bars. Do you have any idea who might have done it? Rizia didn't hesitate for a second. Randall, of course. Who else? Why are you so sure? Because he's a violent and jealous man, Rizia replied bitterly. He's done time for armed robbery before. Violence is not new to him. But Randall has an alibi for the time of the murder, Jasmine pointed out. He was at a job interview at the body shop. And you believe that? Rizia snorted. His friend could easily have lied to protect him. You mean Kwame Price? That's right. He and Randall had always had each other's backs, ever since high school. Jasmine made a note in her notebook. It's interesting that Rizia brought up Kwame right away, not even knowing that the detective had already spoken to him. How would you describe Kimbra and Randall's relationship? Rizia grinned bitterly. My sister was too kind and naive. She always saw the best in Randall, even when he didn't deserve it. Even when he went to prison, she stayed loyal to him, though she could have found someone more deserving. Had Kimbra ever complained about her husband's abuse? No, Rizia admitted reluctantly, but she always defended him, even when he didn't deserve it. How often did you talk to your sister? Every week, sometimes more. I tried to convince her to start a new life when Randall went down, but she refused to even hear about it. And how did you feel about Kimbra's friendship with Kwame Price? Something resembling alarm flashed in Rezia's eyes, but she quickly controlled herself. Kwame helped her when she needed it. I was grateful to him for that. Was it only friendship that bound them together? What do you mean? Rezia's voice became tense. Did you have suspicions that there might have been a romantic connection between your sister and Kwame? Rezia stood up and walked to the window, turning away from the detective. I don't know what to answer you, she said finally. Kimbra was lonely. Kwame cared for her. What went on between them is none of my business. But you had suspicions? Jasmine insisted. I saw the way they looked at each other, Rezia answered quietly. And one day I went to Kimbra's house unannounced and found him there. It was late, and he was too domestic for just a friend. Did you talk to Kimbra about this? Yeah. She denied it, said it was just friendship, but I saw her blush when I mentioned his name. Did Randall know about your suspicions? I didn't tell him anything. Rezia shook her head. But he's no fool. He must have suspected something when he came back. That information made Jasmine wonder. If there really was an affair between Kimbra and Kwame, it could be a motive for murder, both for Randall and for Kwame herself, if Kimbra decided to end the relationship after her husband returned. When was the last time you saw your sister alive? The day before the murder, Rezia answered, returning to her chair. I stopped by their house that evening. Randall was at home and the atmosphere was tense. In what way? They'd obviously had a fight before I got there. Kimbra looked upset, and Randall could barely contain his anger. I didn't stay long. It was obvious my timing was off. What they were fighting about, do you know? No, Kimbra didn't tell me, but I can guess. Randall was probably starting to suspect something. After talking to Rezia, Jasmine returned to the station with even more questions than she had before. If Kimbra's sister was to be believed, there really could have been an affair between the victim and Kwame. That gave Randall a motive for murder, but his alibi was solid. The detective decided to double-check the case file. The autopsy report indicated that Kimbra had sexual intercourse shortly before her death. The DNA test wasn't ready yet, but Jasmine was almost certain that the results would point to Randall. The couple had reconciled after the argument, and morning sex would have been a logical follow-up. However, what if it wasn't Randall? What if Kimbra met with someone right after her husband left? With Kwame, for example. The heat in Ardencroft was unrelenting. The air was thick and heavy, as if soaked with the anxiety and tension surrounding an unsolved murder. Detective Jasmine Powell sat at her desk in the police station, scrutinizing Kimbra Rayford's case file. Crime scene photos, forensic reports, interview notes, all laid out in front of her like pieces of a puzzle that never quite fit together. Randall Rayford had been released from custody after his alibi was confirmed, but he remained the prime suspect in the public eye. The local newspaper had already run a story with the headline, "Ex-convict suspected of murdering wife." Jasmine knew how such stories worked. The public always craves simple answers, and an ex-con who killed his wife in a fit of jealousy fit the pattern perfectly. But her detective instincts told her it wasn't that simple. There were too many inconsistencies, too many loose ends in the witness statements. Carter, she turned to her partner, who was studying the forensics report. Don't you find it odd that we still haven't found the murder weapon? Detective Carter pulled away from the papers and shrugged. The killer could have taken it with him. Exactly, Jasmine nodded. Which means the murder was premeditated. Someone came to the Rayford house, killed Kimbra, and took the crime weapon to hide the evidence. That doesn't sound like a crime of passion. You don't think it was Randall? Carter asked. He had an alibi. He couldn't have been physically in the apartment at the time of the murder. He could have hired someone, Carter suggested. For what kind of money? Jasmine objected. They barely had enough to pay the rent. Besides, if he wanted to get rid of his wife, why would he do it right after he got back from prison when suspicion would inevitably fall on him? Carter thought for a moment, tapping his pencil on the desk. So who are you thinking of? Jasmine stared silently at the photograph of Kwame Price taken during the interrogation. I need to take another look at the Rayford apartment, she said, rising from her chair. I want to test a theory. The Rayford apartment had been sealed after the evidence was collected, but Jasmine had a key and permission to look again. Inside, everything was the same as the day of the murder, except for the absence of the body and traces of blood, which had been thoroughly documented and then washed away by forensics. The detective walked slowly through the rooms, trying to see what she might have missed on her first inspection. She opened drawers, looked under furniture, tapped the walls looking for hiding places. In the bedroom, an old jewelry box on Kimbra's dressing table caught her eye. Jasmine opened it. Inside were the usual feminine trinkets, hairpins, bracelets, cheap costume jewelry. But when she tried to close the box, something was sticking. Jasmine looked more closely and discovered that the bottom of the box was double-layered. Hidden between the 2 layers of cardboard were several folded pieces of paper. The detective carefully pulled them out and unfolded them. They were handwritten letters. The handwriting was angular, masculine. Jasmine began to read the first one. "My dear Kim, I know you said it's best if we don't see each other for a while, but I can't stop thinking about you. Last night was magical. I never thought I could feel that way about someone. I know the situation is difficult and you're worried about what will happen when R comes back. But we could be happy together. I know that. Think about it. Always yours, Kay." The second letter was even more blunt. "Kim, it's been 3 months since our first night together, and I still wake up thinking about you. I know it's hard for you to make a decision, but time is running out. R will be out soon, and we have to make up our minds. I love you and I'm ready to be with you no matter what. But you have to choose. K." The last letter was dated just a week earlier. "Kim, I can't do this anymore. You said it was over, that now that R is back, you want to try to save your marriage. I understand, but I can't accept that. We were together for almost 2 years. 2 years, Kim! You can't just blow it off and go back to him like nothing happened. We need to talk. I'll meet you at our place tomorrow. Always loving you, K." Jasmine scrutinized the letters. Although they were signed only with the initials K, she had no doubt that the author was Kwame Price. And judging from the contents, there had indeed been an affair between him and Kimbra that had lasted almost the entire time of Randall's imprisonment. That changed everything. Kwame now had an obvious motive: a spurned lover, unable to accept that the woman he'd been with for 2 years had chosen to return to her husband. Jasmine folded the letters neatly and tucked them away in a special evidence bag. Now she had proof, and it was time to have a serious talk with Kwame Price. But first, she decided to talk to Randall. He deserved to know the truth, even if that truth would hurt him. Randall was temporarily staying with relatives after his apartment became a crime scene. When Jasmine arrived, he was sitting on the porch, looking nowhere. His eyes were red from crying and lack of sleep. "Detective Powell," he nodded when he saw her. "Any news?" Jasmine sat down next to him on the step. "Mr. Rayford, I have some information I need to share with you. It may be painful for you." Randall tensed, his hands clenched into fists. "What is it? Did you find the killer?" "Not exactly," Jasmine replied. "But I have new evidence." She pulled out a bag of letters. "I found these in the apartment, hidden in Kimbra's jewelry box." Randall took the letters with trembling hands and began to read. With each line, his face grew darker and darker, and his eyes filled with pain and anger. "Kwame," he whispered as he finished reading. "My best friend and my wife. I'm so sorry," Jasmine said quietly. 2 years, Randall shook his head, his voice shaking. "All the time I sat there thinking about her every day, wishing I could go back to her. She was with him." "Judging by the last letter, Kimbra decided to end her relationship with Kwame after you returned," Jasmine remarked. "She chose you." "And now what?" Randall asked, looking at the detective with pain in his eyes. "Do you think Kwame killed her?" "He has a motive," Jasmine answered cautiously. "A spurned lover who couldn't come to terms with the loss. But I need proof. I just wanted you to know the truth." Randall lowered his head, his shoulders heaving with silent sobs. "I felt something was wrong," he whispered. "But I never couldn't imagine that Kwame." Jasmine gave him time to deal with his emotions, then asked cautiously, "Mr. Rayford, Do you have any idea where that special place that Kwame mentions in the last letter might have been? Randall wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I'm not sure. Maybe an old abandoned park on the edge of the neighborhood? We used to go there a lot as teenagers. There's a gazebo there where we'd sometimes have a drink. Jasmine nodded, making a note in her notebook. Thank you. That might help. Before leaving, she turned around. Mr. Rayford, I know this is difficult, but please don't do anything rash. Leave it to us to deal with this. Randall didn't answer, continuing to stare into the space in front of him. The next item on Jasmine's investigation was Regia Johnston. After their earlier conversation, the detective was certain that Kimbra's sister knew more about the affair than she was admitting. Regia looked tense as she opened the door. You again, detective? She asked with undisguised irritation. Do you have news? May I come in? Jasmine asked instead of answering. Regia reluctantly let her into the house. Miss Johnston, Jasmine began as they sat down in the living room, I found letters from Kwame to your sister, letters that confirm that they were having an affair. Regia flinched but said nothing. You knew about it, didn't you? Jasmine continued. In our last conversation you hinted at it, but you didn't say it directly. Why? Regia took a deep breath as if making a decision. Yes, I knew, she finally admitted. Kimbra never told me directly, but I've seen them together. I saw the way they looked at each other. It was obvious. When did their relationship begin? About 6 months after Randall sat down, Regia answered. Kwame took care of her, helped her. One thing led to another. She was so lonely. Why didn't you tell me this before? Regia looked away. I didn't want to tarnish my sister's memory. She wasn't a bad person, detective. She just made a mistake. Did Randall know? I don't think so. Not before your investigation anyway, but he probably suspected something. Men sense these things. What happened when Randall got back from prison? Kimbra decided to give her marriage another chance, Regia said with bitterness in her voice. She told Kwame that it was over. He didn't take it well. Didn't take it well? Jasmine interjected. What does that mean? He was furious, Regia explained. Calling her in the middle of the night, threatening to tell Randall everything. Kimbra was afraid he might do something rash. Do you think he might have killed her? Regia was silent for a long time before answering. I don't know, but if you're asking if he had a motive, yes, he did. He loved Kimbra. He really did. And when she chose Randall, it might have broken him. After talking to Regia, Jasmine was almost certain that Kwame was involved in the murder. But she still lacked direct evidence. She needed to find the murder weapon. She went to the old park Randall had mentioned. The abandoned gazebo was indeed there, half hidden by overgrown trees. Jasmine carefully searched the area around it, but found nothing. If Kwame had gotten rid of the murder weapon here, he had hidden it well. Back at the station, the detective got the results of the DNA test. As she suspected, the DNA found on Kimbra's body was Randall's. It corroborated his testimony that they had reconciled the morning before he left for his job interview. However, there was another result that caught Jasmine's attention. Microtraces of someone else's DNA were found on Kimbra's clothing, and that DNA didn't belong to Randall. The sample was too small for full identification, but if they had a sample of Kwame's DNA for comparison, Jasmine decided it was time for a confrontation. She summoned Kwame Price to the station for a second interrogation. When Kwame entered the interrogation room, Jasmine noticed that he looked even more tense than the last time they had met. His eyes were running restlessly around the room, and his hands were trembling slightly. Mr. Price, Jasmine began, thank you for coming. I have some new questions about the Kimbra Rayford case. I've already told you everything, Kwame muttered. I don't know what else you want to know. Jasmine silently took out the letters and placed them on the table in front of Kwame. His face paled when he saw the familiar handwriting. Where did you get these? He asked hoarsely. In the Rayford apartment, Jasmine replied. In Kimbra's box. She kept all your letters, Mr. Price. All the evidence of your affair. Kwame closed his eyes as if in pain. It was a long time ago, he said at last. It had nothing to do with her murder. I think it does, Jasmine objected. Judging from the last letter, Kimbra decided to end your relationship after Randall returned. You were furious, unable to accept it. You threatened her, stalked her. That's not true, Kwame exclaimed, pounding his fist on the table. Yes, I was upset, but I would never hurt her. Where were you that morning, Mr. Price? Jasmine asked. And this time, please tell the truth. Kwame fell silent, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for a way out. I've already told you. I was at home, asleep after the night shift. You have no alibi, Jasmine said. No one can confirm that you were home at the time of the murder. That doesn't mean I killed her. You called Kimbra on the morning of the murder, Jasmine continued. Why? To remind me about the interview for Randall, Kwame answered quickly. I already told you. That's it? You didn't arrange to meet her while Randall was at the interview? No! Kwame exclaimed, but his eyes gave him away. Jasmine decided to change tactics. Mr. Price, we found traces of DNA on Kimbra's clothes. DNA that doesn't belong to Randall. That wasn't entirely true. They only had micro traces, not enough for full identification. But Kwame didn't know that. Yeah, I don't know what you mean, he muttered, but his face grew even paler. We can take a sample of your DNA for comparison, Jasmine suggested. A simple swab from your mouth. If you're as innocent as you claim, it will only confirm what you say. Kwame swallowed nervously. I want a lawyer, he finally said. Jasmine nodded. It was practically a sign of guilt. An innocent man would have agreed to a DNA test to prove his innocence. Of course, that's your right. But before we finish, I'd like to show you something else. She pulled out a photograph of a heavy glass souvenir, a statuette in the shape of a small globe on a stand. Do you recognize it? She asked. This statue was found in a dumpster near your house. There were traces of Kimbra's blood and fingerprints on it. It was a pure lie. They hadn't found any statue. But Jasmine hoped this pressure would make Kwame break. And it had worked. Kwame stared at the photograph with horror, his hands beginning to shake violently. This is impossible, he whispered. I cleaned it all out. I mean, it's not what you think. What happened that morning, Kwame? Jasmine asked softly. Tell me. And like a dam breaking, Kwame began to speak. I didn't mean to kill her, he said, tears streaming down his face. I loved Kimbra. We were together for almost 2 years while Randall was incarcerated. I took care of her. I was there for her when she wasn't well. And then he came back and she just, threw me away like nothing happened. You went to see her that morning? Jasmine prompted. Yes, Kwame nodded. I knew Randall would be at the interview. I arranged it myself. I wanted to talk to her alone, to convince her that we should be together. What happened? She wouldn't listen to me. Kwame's voice shook. She said it was over, that she loved Randall and always had, that what was between us was just a mistake, a moment of weakness. I couldn't take it. I grabbed the damn statue off the coffee table and... He stopped, shuddering with sobs. You hit it, Jasmine finished for him. I didn't mean to, Kwame shouted. It was a moment of rage. I wasn't in control of myself. And then she fell, and there was blood, so much blood. I panicked. And you strangled her, Jasmine said, to make sure she was dead. Kwame nodded, his face contorted with grief and remorse. I don't know why I did it. I loved her, I couldn't accept that she chose him, after everything that had happened between us. Jasmine made a sign to the policeman waiting outside the door. Kwame Price, you are under arrest on suspicion of the murder of Kimbra Rayford. You have the right to remain silent. As Kwame was led away, Jasmine felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness. The case had been solved, the killer confessed. But at what cost? 3 lives had been ruined because of a love triangle, jealousy, and a moment of unbridled rage. The only thing left to do was to inform Randall of Kwam's confession. She found him in the same place, on the porch of his in-laws' house. Mr. Rayford, she began. I have some news. Kwam Price has confessed to the murder of your wife. Randall looked up at her with eyes that held no surprise, only endless weariness and pain. I guessed it, he said quietly. When you showed me the letters, I knew it could only be him. I'm sorry, Jasmine said. Do you know what the most ironic thing is? Randall asked with a bitter chuckle. When I was sitting there, it was thinking about Kimbra that kept me alive. I imagined going back to her, starting over, And all the while, she was with my best friend. She chose you, Jasmine reminded me softly. When you came back, she decided to save your marriage, and it cost her life. Randall shook his head. If she had chosen him, if she'd just told me the truth. He didn't finish the sentence, but Jasmine understood what he meant. If Kimbra had been honest with him, she might still be alive. What are you going to do now? The detective asked. Randall stared into the distance for a long time before answering. I don't know. Maybe leave town. There are too many memories here. Too much betrayal. Jasmine nodded understandingly. She'd seen enough tragedy in her work to know that some wounds never fully healed. If you need anything, she said, holding out her card. Call me. Randall took the card and nodded absently. Thank you, detective, for finding my wife's killer. By the time Jasmine left, the sun was setting, coloring the sky over Ardencroft blood red. The heat was finally beginning to subside, but for Randall Rayford, alone with his thoughts of betrayal and loss, the cold had already penetrated deep into his heart. He sat motionless, staring at the setting sun, his mind replaying over and over the past 2 weeks. The return home, the brief happiness with Kimbra, the suspicions, the arguments, and then her death and the revelation of the truth. So much loss, so much pain, all because of the deception that had begun 2 years ago, when the prison doors had closed behind him and the doors of his wife's house had opened to his best friend.